That point about learning more about your colleagues as part of the training is one that certainly hadn't occurred. So we're building a common language, working better as a team, not just learning how to be a better manager for an individual. I'm wondering also if one learns a little bit about oneself.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the two IPs in a pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
Hey Gwilym, how are you?
I'm really good. I'm gearing up.
I didn't even give you a chance to reply then, didn't I? I was just going to tell you how I was. How are you?
I'm really well. How are you, Lee?
I'm really good. Just a little bit disappointed that I put on a more of a summery shirt today. I know the colour probably doesn't look it, but you probably can't see through the camera that it's like crocheted, and it was a mistake because the wind was blowing through it this morning, and I felt quite cold.
It also did give me a slight headache because it's playing havoc with the pixels.
It's strobing, isn't it? Yeah. I didn't appreciate
it. It isn't summery. It's quite goth, I'm afraid, Lee, from colour scheme perspective.
It was summery in the sense that it's crocheted, and I thought that would give me a feeling of sort of being at one with the sunshine, but the sunshine's gone. So
why do you associate crochet with sunshine?
Yeah, no idea. Perhaps I thought I was going to get a little bit of a micro suntan or something like that. But
like sunbathing through a sieve.
Yeah, exactly that. Hey, is this something I can patent?
Not anymore. We disclosed it.
Oh no, of course. I always make that mistake. I always give away my inventions. What have you been up to? Bank holiday weekend? Did you do anything exciting?
No, but that was a good thing because I'm very happy not to do exciting things. I've got Beth, so we did lovely Beth things. But we are currently gearing up for next Sunday for a giant teddy bears picnic.
Oh, cool. Why next Sunday? Is it birthday time?
No, that's when it is. It's in the local park. There's a giant teddy bears picnic. Oh. We don't know whether it's a giant picnic for teddy bears, a picnic for giant teddy bears. There's various variants on it. So you can bring a picnic and a giant teddy bear, I think, is probably how we're going to solve that.
That is such a typical patent attorney way to interpret what is just a way of describing a very friendly event, isn't it?
It's ambiguous and I think, unfortunately, quite difficult to infringe. So I wouldn't have granted a patent on that claim.
So sometimes on the podcast, conversations about mental health. So we've got a big posse of guests with us today, Gwilym. So this always taxes us, doesn't it? Because it's quite difficult to keep one person in order, let alone four, which is where we are today. So let's get our guests on and get them to introduce themselves, if that's okay. Penny, shall I start with you? Are you the most obvious person to come to first?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, you can very well start with me. So I'm Penny Aspinall, and I am the mental health consultant for the charity Jonathan's Voice. But at the end of May, I'm stepping down and my role will be taken over by some wonderful person called Donna Smith. So this is my kind of the end of my farewell tour, if you like.
Oh.
Pleased to be here, to be joining you today. So
who have you got with you, Penny? Who do you want to bring on first?
So what I really wanted to bring on today was a sort of group of people who could give their perspective about why line manager training is important. So we've got Joanne Donaldson, who's head of operations. Well, she can introduce herself. So I think we've got a good selection of people who can talk about this really important issue from different angles to get a real 360-degree look at why line manager training is a good thing.
Yeah, hiya, Joanne. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. So my name's Jo. I'm head of operations at Hazeltine Lake Kempner, where I've been for about the last 19 years. I joined originally as a patent administrator, was a manager for a team of patent administrators there for about 6 years, and then moved into my current role about 3 years ago. I'm a member of the Mental Health and Wellbeing Group at HLK, and I'm a mental health first aider. And I've worked on quite a few projects with Jonathan's Voice over the last few years, including having Penny to come and do some mental health for line manager training with us last year with a group of our line managers.
Cool. Who should we talk to next, Penny?
Let's talk to Cathy.
Hey, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So I'm Cathy Bailey. I manage one of our chemistry and biotech groups in the Intellectual Property Office. I previously was a patent examiner years ago. Actually left. I had some counselling when I was suffering the bereavement at the time, and left the organisation and ran wellbeing offerings all around many different places, including mental health managers training in different places and mental health first aid training. Got drawn back into the Intellectual Property Office, where I've now found actually all that stuff as a manager is really, really important and useful, and do lots of wellbeing work whilst I'm here.
Thank you.
Finally, we thought we'd better have an attorney in the mix, so we asked Sally to come and join us. Not that Gwilym isn't an attorney, of course, but
Penny asked me to get involved in this, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Penny. I'm bringing the perspective of a patent attorney, probably more from an employee perspective rather than a manager. Although I have had manager responsibilities in the past, but like most people, I've hit the buffers from time to time with my mental health, and so giving a little bit of perspective about that and times when I've been managed well and maybe not so well, even with the best will in the world, well-meaning managers, but not necessarily the best environment sometimes in my past life. And I think where I am now, the team that I'm with now does a pretty good job, to be honest. So can maybe talk about that a bit as well, and what I think feels good from an employee, from a patent attorney perspective. I'm a senior European patent attorney and I work in-house. I've always worked in-house, so that would be where I'm coming from.
Cool. So where do we start the conversation?
I can kick off. So basically, and I think Cathy can back this up, there's been research from various different quarters, and it's been endorsed by the World Health Organization, that there is a lot of benefit to training line managers in supporting mental health in your organization, both in the individual employees, but also in creating a culture that in itself supports mental health. Because I'm a great sort of proponent of saying, let's focus on preventative and proactive measures, as well as dealing with the individuals if they start to struggle. And so there's a lot of evidence out there to show that if you're going to invest in anything to support mental health in your organization, your best bet really is to go for some line manager training. And that is ideally not an hour-long online sort of talk, but something proper, at least a day, I would say, that can really bring about some kind of real learning, so that line managers, who are often just made into managers because they're good at the job with very little preparation, can really get the skills and the confidence in being able to recognise if somebody is starting to struggle with their mental health or well-being, and also to be able to then approach them, or if somebody comes to them, know how to deal with it, to put in place the right kind of adjustments, just to know how to have that conversation, where to refer, and so on. This is not something I think you can do by magic or by instinct. Some people obviously are probably better at it than others, but by no means not everybody. So as I say, I'm a great fan of thinking, okay, let's get some training in place just to help people with that, and also create maybe a community of line managers so they feel confident if they're starting to wobble with this or not quite sure about what to do, they can get support from each other.
And can I just test what we mean when we say line manager, Penny, just to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing, because sometimes it's used almost exclusively for those people that have got relatively senior roles and are managing a number of teams, many people. Sometimes it's used in that more distributed fashion where it's anyone who's got any kind of management or supervisory role involving one or more other people. And I'm guessing we're at that second definition, are we? It's anyone who's managing people?
I think Joanne could answer that question really well.
Yeah, I think we're probably coming at it from the second approach. Certainly from the work that we've been doing at HLK, we're looking at anyone who has any kind of management responsibility for someone else. The skills and things that we're talking about here, and a lot of the information, is actually really relevant to all of our interactions with other colleagues. It's relevant for everyone. But yeah, from a general sense, we're looking at any form of line management responsibility for one or more.
Cool.
I'm wondering a bit about somebody who's a line manager, as you say, at any level, who is told, oh, you need to do some mental health training. And certainly my immediate questions are, how long, how often, and what's in it? And I mean, Penny, you've given a hint there about the duration, a day's worth. But is that a day that has to be run in one block, or can you spread it out? How does it all work? What does it sound like when you actually have this training?
Well, I can talk from my point of view, and I'm sure Cathy could sort of talk from her point of view as well. So I think it's really difficult. There's always that tension between giving up the time to do something well and thinking, I can't spare the time, so let's do it in smaller chunks. And it's a huge temptation, I think, possibly since the pandemic, to do things online and in small chunks, because they're practically much more doable than giving up a whole day, ideally in person. I'd say a minimum of a day, ideally in person. And I think the in-person thing gives some real benefit that you don't get from online, because you can sort of build up a sense of trust and connect with other people and chat with other people in a way that is not impossible, but much harder online. And I think it's much harder to concentrate over a longer period of time if you're doing a training online. So in my ideal world, we'd be looking at a group of perhaps a maximum of about 18 in a room together for a day. That would be my ideal. But I do recognise that we don't live in an ideal world, and that maybe there are other ways of thinking about it and doing it if one's being pragmatic. So, for example, I did do something with one firm. They couldn't do that, so I did, just 2 hours, but I said, I'm just going to focus on one specific area of it, which was about having the conversation, recognise the signs and symptoms of having the conversation. And we did that quite effectively online. It had good feedback, but that was just one little small part, I think, of the whole picture. I mean, I don't know if Cathy, you want to add anything around your experience of delivery.
Yeah, well, I think there's so much you can do, and I think I'd like to just move the focus away from it being a one-off, one-hit thing to something that's sort of flexible and embedded. And I think, but also being very responsive to the needs of the managers, looking at the evidence in the organisation, what's going on. Like, if there's massive issues with stress, it might be there's a focus on stress. If there's a lot of feedback saying actually managers haven't got the skills and the resources or the time to spend time having the conversations, maybe we need to look at that. So there's that kind of more holistic view. But I think managing mental health training is such an important part of that, and the reactive skill. They could be like, even just having a short awareness session at the start can make a difference. I think with training, it's how long is a bit of string. That day, Penny, sounds like a brilliant idea. And if an organisation can invest that time in their managers, so they can spend the whole day looking at the skills they've got, and the guidance changes. So people, like you said, people might have like an instinctive way of managing that's actually really good for mental health. But even if so, having that time to reflect and look at how we do it and look at how we can be better can be really important. And just looking at sort of current research and evidence and what's good, but also making sure that's not the end of the story. So if we do have a day's training, we have follow-up conversations, like something we did. We had training for managers, but we put in kind of reflection sessions afterwards, so people could have time to embed the training and then kind of reflect on what was good and what was working. So it's something that carries on, and we keep thinking about it as well. So yeah, there is always more, but I guess making sure that we put things in place, see what happens, look at the feedback, and don't make that the last thing in this story.
Yeah, and I'd like to add just one more point, that also having a training that everybody does can ensure some sort of consistency. I don't know if because I know we found even within certain small organisations, there can be quite inconsistent ways that people interpret or understand what's meant to be done. And so I suppose at least if you can manage to train everybody together, if training's the right word, or brief everybody together, then at least you're getting a consistent message across the organisation.
Yeah, it picks up on this aspect of culture as well, doesn't it? And what Cathy was saying about like sustaining things and Penelope getting people aligned it's not about like just ticking the box that people have been trained. It's a mindset within an organization that this is what we're doing. We think it's important, and this is how we're doing it. I remember when I was younger and I had a bit of a dip in my mental health, being sent away for a series of cognitive behavioral therapy sessions. And I really felt like my manager just ticked a box, and the manager was a very well-meaning person. And I think it wasn't, coming from him. I think it was that the organization was in a bit of a tick box mode about mental health related things at that point in time. So that holistic, sustaining approach, that this is part of our culture, this is what we're doing, it's important, is key. And you're creating that fertile soil in the organisation as well, so that when the people are coming along to the training, they see the point, to what you were saying earlier, Gwilym, why am I here? Why am I doing this? If everyone buys into the concept that it's part of the organisation's culture, then the thing happens and the goodwill is there, and the behaviours are sustained and people are alert to it. So it's something that's always happening rather than just being a training that people have done.
That's really interesting. Your point on the consistent messaging is really, that resonates actually. We had, in my office, we had some training on a completely separate thing about strategy. We were told the strategy is about having a vision, and then the strategy is how you achieve your vision. But the guy had a flip chart and he drew a blue line between where you are now and the vision. And the whole partnership now talks about whether something's on the blue line or not. And we have, if you didn't know what the background was, you wouldn't understand that at all. But it means that we've got this incredible shorthand for making sure that we're speaking exactly the same language. So the consistency point does resonate really strongly, actually. But also that point about it fitting in with, the particular circumstances of the business. But I was going to ask Jo, if I may. You mentioned you've done some of this. What shape did it take for you guys?
Yeah, so we ran it as a full in-person day. We did it back in November. Last year we implemented a management development program for some of our line managers. So that was a scheme that was put in place for sort of general line management skills training for a collection of about a dozen people from across the business, all different levels, those with line management responsibility or those that might be progressing to that stage. And then I got the agreement to run the mental health line manager training as an extra day sort of at the end of the course. That worked really well for us in the sense that we had a group of people who were already sort of really engaged in the process of learning and in taking that dedicated time out of their work to focus on learning new skills in relation to line management. I think it was a really positive day. It definitely makes a difference having it in person, being able to sort of interact, share stories with each other, get to know people in a way that you probably wouldn't if you were doing this on a Teams call or something like that. And certainly I found that I got different perspectives about people that I work with regularly, just because we're sharing things that we're not used to sharing, perhaps. And I think it was really good as well. We sort of looked at some of our internal policies and how we deal with like what offerings we have to support people who might be going through difficult periods. And that was really useful to be able to discuss that in a group so that we could talk about how might you go about reasonable adjustments or supporting someone on return to work. And when you're in an organisation that has a lot of line managers, that's really important to make sure that you're getting that consistent message out and the consistent experience, because I think that's one of the things that I'm very conscious of, is that individuals within the organisation can have very different experiences with their line managers. So if we're sort of sending out the same message, then it helps support that consistent approach for us.
So Gwilym, I know you've got more to say there, but what I heard there, Jo, if it's okay for me to just quickly test that, is, so I think I'm hearing that there is more to training line managers in mental health awareness development than just the individual benefit, the benefit that they would have in their relationships with the people that they're responsible for managing. I think I heard that there's kind of team building, development opportunities there, and generally encouraging people to work better and smarter together, but also that there are organisational development benefits. I think that's what I heard. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's benefits across the board. It's for you as an individual, as a manager, to learn better skills so you feel more comfortable in supporting your colleagues. You better understand how to relate to your line manager as well, and to kind of keep those conversations open. But it's creating that environment for everyone, which is really important as well, to make sure that it becomes, we're all used to how to recognise changes in each other and to sort of support that without making rash judgments, and encouraging people to actually talk about what's happening in their lives. And how that might be affecting them and how we can support them through that, because we're all going through different things all the time.
Fab, thank you.
Can I ask a tricky one? Sally.
No one said
Sally,
yes.
you mentioned,
No one said yes.
No one said yes. No one said no. You're all too.
Oh, go for it, Gwilym.
Sally, you said that sometimes you've had good handling and sometimes not so good handling, and it's generally been well-meaning, which I'd like to believe is going to be the case. Actually, my basic question: do you think there's any distinction between the handling between people of maybe different generations? Maybe just chucking that one in as a person from a certain generation.
I think there's probably lots of factors. It's someone's personal circumstances, someone's personality, their style of managing. I'm just reflecting on different managers that I've had and Rolodexing through them in my head. There was one person who set one-to-ones in my calendar, but routinely didn't keep them, which was very bad, and Joe, you were mentioning that, like, about keeping the conversation open between the line manager and the people they're managing. If you don't keep your one-to-ones, it's just, it's stressful, because you just lose. And again, it's kind of like going back to that, like, strategy thing, Gwilym, that if you're keeping everyone aligned, you need to keep the interactions going and the conversations going. And something as simple as like having a one-to-one on a regular basis and keeping it, prioritizing it, is super helpful. And it's helpful for the manager as well, quite frankly, because, if something's going on for the person you're managing, you want to know about it, and guide them through it. So that was a stressful time for me. And I was relatively senior then. I was a senior IP counsel in that role. But I just, it's like we're all working 90 miles an hour, and you just need to have that, like, okay, touch base. So I think there's multiple things in answer to your question. Like, the generational can impact it. I mean, when I think of the kind of generational thing, I probably more think of like my trajectory over the last 20 or so years that I've been working. That back in the day, it was done probably more traditionally.
Okay.
You didn't necessarily bring your personal stuff to the office. It wasn't encouraged. I think that, for me anyway, that's changed. And I imagine for others as well, that I was probably, guided towards, when I'm talking to my manager, I'm talking about professional things. You're not talking about personal things with your manager. But now it's the opposite. Not, that, you have to talk about things. Everyone should only speak about their personal things to the extent they feel comfortable, but bringing your whole self to work is important for you and for the team. And if you've got at least one person that's you can confide in about personal things in the workplace, it's so helpful. It's so helpful. I mean, I even notice. I mean, I'm in my early 50s now, and there's a lady who left who's a similar age to me, and I miss her being around to talk about things like perimenopause. Like, God, I feel really like anxious today, and she's like, oh, don't worry about it. I felt like that, and having that sounding board, and you just calm down when you've got someone to confide in, even if it's just one person. So certainly over the years, that's changed, and that's probably reflecting, different generational ways of thinking.
Penny.
Can I just add also that it's not easy doing this stuff, and that often managers are expected to somehow incorporate it into their everything else they have to do, without perhaps being given the acknowledgement that if you have got a reasonable sized team and you're doing regular one-to-ones, that is going to be taking time out of your day and your workload, and is sometimes quite hard to manage that if it's somehow, people somehow expect it just to sort of happen as if by magic, without acknowledging this could take up quite a big chunk of your time. And if you are supporting somebody who's really struggling, that can take even more time, and also a certain amount of emotional energy as well. And again, I think that needs to be acknowledged. And maybe that's a generational shift, because back in the day when you never brought your work problems to work, perhaps the delineations were clearer. You didn't even have one-to-ones. I remember you might have had an annual review and that was about it, unless you specifically went to seek your line manager out. So I think it's not only a generational shift in terms of age, and maybe younger generations having a more being able to talk more comfortably about their mental health issues and their problems, and expect to be looked after at work. But maybe it's in systems as well, that this is all now being built much more into your role as a manager, that you are going to be expected to be taking care of your staff in a way that maybe 20, 30 years ago you wouldn't have the same extent. So I think another reason why it is good to have some training, and also for firms to sort of acknowledge that actually this can be quite difficult and needs to be factored in to what you're expected to do in your role if you have managerial responsibilities. And I certainly would like to say that from a personal experience, where I sort of ended up with 18 direct reports in one job I had. And I thought, oh my God, if I'm seeing them every fortnight for a half-hour one-to-one, I'm not going to have time to do anything else. This is completely unrealistic. So sometimes I think there is a disconnect between what these sort of angelic line managers are meant to do and what they can in reality do. So just say I have a huge sympathy if line managers are struggling with this, or perhaps feel, oh my God, this isn't quite realistic. So I know I was being a bit devil's advocate here, but that's why I think it's really good to have a sort of support network around you, so you can talk around this stuff and feel that there are people you can share the load with.
But Cathy, I think you were going to say something then.
Yeah, it's going to just answer me a question about different generations. And I think you can have people of any generation being a great line manager or not a great line manager. And some of the stats on how managers impact mental health were took me back. There was a survey a couple of years ago, and I think about half of people who responded had quit a job because of their line manager. And I think about a quarter of the respondents had had nightmares because of a line manager. So it can have that massive negative impact, but also that massive positive impact. And as a counsellor, the people who come and have really good line manager support makes such a difference. And there was some sort of evidence saying that actually that social support from line managers can have more of a positive effect than counselling sometimes. So, we can't downplay it. But agreeing with Penny, that doesn't always come easily. And, even people who are really good at supporting their people, it can use time, it can use energy. And, for all those reasons, I think if you're a line manager supporting somebody with mental health problems, just making sure you're feeling supported. And part of that might be the training, making sure you've got the skills and you're doing the right stuff can make you feel more confident, which can help you feel supported, but making sure you speak to other people as well, and you're not alone and you're not carrying it all on your shoulders.
That's really interesting. There's definitely saying, isn't it? You don't leave your job, you leave your boss. I've definitely heard that before now, worryingly. And I've never, little personal revelation, I've never had a nightmare about a manager. I have had a disturbing dream about one that I'm not going to go into. But so that was enough.
That could be the closer question. That could be the closer question.
What disturbing dream have you had about your boss? Not sure. I was actually going to comment though on go back to very earlier on, actually, Penny, your point about making it a day. And obviously you can't always do it, but I can see conversely that the business says we have put a day aside for this. Put everything away and go and do it. It feels like a really important message. If you say, dial in for 1 hour recordings when you've got a minute, you're kind of not really supporting it as a business, are you? I'm not saying businesses have to make it a day, by the way, but I can see why that would give it extra weight.
Definitely. And I agree with Cathy that a one-off day isn't, there needs perhaps be follow-up in an ideal world, and maybe some other follow-up kind of sessions, perhaps on, I didn't quite get it about reasonable adjustments. Maybe, there's somewhere I could go to top up on that. But I do think that, for me, I think you can't replicate the in-person bit, because I always think you get more learning from your colleagues and the other participants than you do from the person standing up front talking. There's a much more experiential kind of learning, those aha moments, those, oh my goodness, you do it like that, or oh gosh, I'm not the only one who feels like that, or oh, that's a good idea. I think that's much more, I think that's the kind of learning you remember, because something shifts inside you rather than listening to somebody and you think, oh, that was really interesting, and then a week later you've forgotten all about it, I mean, let's face it, that does happen. So something that actually creates that shift inside you, I think, is really important. And in an ideal world where you've experienced the need for it as well, where you think, oh gosh, I've no idea what I'm doing here. And then somebody comes along and says, right, come and have this training. Think, oh gosh, yes, that would be really helpful. Then I think you're going to get much more buy-in from people going, rather than, oh, I've got to go along to this boring old training. Yeah, I mean, because we're only human and maybe think, oh, I haven't got time for this. But as Cathy was saying, all the evidence does show that investing that time does pay back dividends. I mean, it's always difficult, isn't it, as well? But do you make it mandatory, or do you make it that you choose to go on? And often it's a self-selecting group, and the kind of people who choose to attend this sort of training are probably the kind of people who don't need it as much as the kind of people who choose not to attend it. But I don't know how you get around that. That's the same with everything, I think, all these sort of trainings.
I was just going to say on the kind of in-person side of things as well, that, if that training's done well and you're talking about mental health, you're talking about a topic that's quite personal. And in an ideal world, you're getting people to be more vulnerable than they ordinarily would. So that even in and of itself is helping the organisation, because you're getting to know your colleagues, your fellow manager colleagues, in a way that you wouldn't otherwise get to know them when they're sharing things that they wouldn't necessarily ordinarily share, because you have to in the context of a mental health training day.
That point about learning more about your colleagues and everything as part of the training is one that certainly hadn't occurred. So we're building a common language, working better as a team, not just learning how to be a better manager for an individual. I'm wondering also if one learns a little bit about oneself. I can imagine going along and thinking, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I should pay a bit more attention to myself for a moment.
Yeah, and it's honestly, that's a really good point, Gwilym. Like, sometimes we don't realize that we're stressed out. I've gone through probably a series of 4-day weeks with bank holidays and taking other days off. And I had a dream that I was sitting my EQEs last week from, based on the level of preparedness that I have as I'm sitting here now. And it was really stressful. And I woke up and I realized, because I'd had that dream, hang on, you're feeling a bit anxious about work, because you're going 90 miles an hour. So, I mean, and that's where the mental health for managers training is valuable. It's being able to spot when people are struggling, when they might not even know themselves, or they might know, but they're, so caught up in it that they don't feel able to reach out, because you can feel so down that you're just enclosed within your feelings and don't feel able to reach out. And that's the scenario where you need people to have the spider sense to, and it's an easy conversation to start when you know how. It's not rocket science. Are you okay? And taking someone aside for just a little conversation like that can be very powerful. When the person either doesn't know or doesn't feel like they're able to seek support.
Can I quickly dive in, Gwilym? Is that all right? Fab, thank you. So Jo, Cathy, Sally, and I should have done my little bit of research beforehand and asked this. Have you all done the training?
Done training, but not Penny's training.
But not Penny's training. Okay, so I can't ask a question about this training specifically, and that's.
I have done this training.
Yes.
I was part of I organised it and joined the session for it. Yes.
Jo, that means that I'm coming to you now. Sorry about that. but so I've obviously done this kind of training in the past. I've not actually done it whilst I've been at Cytiva, so that means I've not done it for 13 years, and I'm now feeling quite guilty about that. And I know that when people go on training like this, you can feel quite apprehensive, because sometimes you feel like you're asked to share stuff that's close to you and personal to you and these kinds of things. Can you give us a helicopter view of what the training's like? So what people might expect to go through? Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. So I think the benefit of having the full day is that you get the sort of more coverage of the different topics. So for us, the day started with talking about sort of mental health and well-being in general, and then also looking at how we fit into that as individuals, how we need to look after ourselves to be able to look after other people, how to spot if people are struggling, how to have conversations, and then leading into what our organisation itself might be offering to support people. So there was a real broad range that we covered. Penny was great. We did it in sessions of presentation sections, and then sort of breaking into small groups to have discussions about it. And I think that was really useful in helping people open up. I mean, the group that we had, most of them had been working together in a group periodically for over sort of a 6-month period. So they were used to talking to each other and opening up to each other already. But breaking down into the small groups helped. You're only talking to one person, 2 people maybe. And so it's a little bit easier to be a bit more vulnerable rather than saying it to the full group. But we did also have bits where we stopped and opened up to the group. Penny would ask a question and people sort of spoke up. And I think that was really helpful. People, like, you didn't have to speak out if you weren't comfortable with doing that. But I think when you start hearing from other people, you get you feel more comfortable yourself. And I think going into these sessions, knowing that it's essentially, a safe space to talk about these topics.
Yeah.
No judgment. You're not, you might say something that other people wouldn't be their first reaction, but that's okay. And that's the point of these sessions, is to find out how people react in these situations and how we can learn from each other and from materials. So, from a totally practical point of view, the day I think we started at 9:30 and finished at sort of around 3. We had a few breaks during the day. So there's a lot of material covered, but then you need that because there will be different things that are relevant to different people. So it means that everyone gets something really valuable out of it that way.
And I think breaking into small groups and things, it gives you time to process the information. If you're just bombarded with a load of information, you don't remember it at all. So I think that's helpful. And I think the whole day does help people build up trust. I remember trying to do a truncated version, half a day. And I think one of the feedback things was that by the end of the half day, people hadn't felt quite safe enough to open up with their colleagues. They're a bit more cagey about what they were able to share. And I think we can tackle difficult things like, well, what happens if somebody refuses to accept that they may be experiencing mental health difficulties, or how you deal with the dynamics in a whole team, because it can impact on the whole team. These are kind of things that are really helpful to discuss with other people. And also it's kind of helpful if we had someone from HR in Joe's group. It's always helpful to have someone who can actually say what the policies are, because I do find that you might know in theory, I think there's a policy somewhere that deals with that, but I can't remember what it is. And in the heat of the moment, you might forget to even look at it. So I think it's quite useful to have somebody there who says, yeah, we have got a policy here, or we do have this EAP, or whatever, just to sort of confirm that people actually do know what's on offer. And with Jonathan's voice, we will always have a conversation with the company to sort of get a sense of what's going to really work best for you, what's appropriate for you, what kind of help do you provide. It's not a sort of one size fits all kind of one. We always try and tailor it to the actual organisation, so that it does actually resonate with you. It does feel appropriate to that particular company. We can do that, which is great, and I think really, really important, because it'd be wasting everyone's time if you went in and thought, well, that's all very well, but it doesn't relate to our company. So
I was going to give you the opportunity to do a sales pitch, Penny, but that felt like it. Except for how do people organise it? How do they go about making the arrangements?
Yeah, well, simple. Just go on our website and send us an email, or I think there's a little form you could fill in. There's what we offer. There's something about the line manager training there. But probably your best way is just to send Jonathan's Voice an email, and all the information there on our website, which is www.jonathansvoice.org.uk, I think, or just Googling.
Where make sure it's in the blurb. Don't worry.
Yeah. Make sure. It's one of those things I get a bit of a blank about. Is it org.uk? I think it is at the end. And all the information is in there. We are a charity, and one of our sort of things is that we don't charge an actual specific sum for the training we do, but we do make we do rely on donations, so we have got a suggested donation, a suggested minimum donation, which would, in an ideal world, at least cover the costs of us putting on the training, especially for the line manager training. So again, there's information about that on the website.
Well, I think we're kind of there or thereabouts, but so Sally and Penny, you've been on before, so you know that me and Gwilym tried to end with some kind of tangential closer question. I'm not sure we've done it with this many guests on the podcast, Gwilym, so I don't know how well this is going to work. So I've been trying to come up with a question that might have a very short answer, so people feel comfortable giving it. Okay, so for Cathy and Joanne's benefit, I'm going to ask a question to Gwilym, who's still there on my screen, and then roll it around all of you, and then Gwilym will come back to me. Gwilym, this time around, I've not done any thinking in advance on what my answer might be, okay? So no, I have an advantage over no one, and I don't know whether this question is going to work, and we might decide to pull it, okay? But I'm sat here thinking we had a bit of a stressful start to this because the tech sort of let us down a wee bit and we couldn't all get in the room and we couldn't start recording. And then you realise that you're in this digital world where it's actually quite difficult to communicate with people because it means sending an email and you don't know if they've read it. So conscious we all started this in a bit of a stressed state. Hopefully we're not in that stressed state now. So I was wondering, Gwilym, if you had to describe how you feel at the moment in the form of maybe an animal or a vegetable or some such thing, how do you feel? Can you speak? Are you too busy laughing?
Mushroom.
do you need to explain that to us? I think I know why. But...
No, I think life is a growth experience. Mushrooms grow, so I feel like as ever I've grown through this. At the same time, mushrooms give me a bit of tummy ache, so a little bit stressed too. So there you go. That's the first word that came up.
Okay.
Analyze that.
So Penny, probably to you next then.
Well, I'm feeling a bit like my first image was a cat on a hot tin roof and not a cat sleeping on a hot tin roof. Hopefully I will be that in about 10 minutes time, but a cat's jumping about a little bit. So that's a bit how I'm feeling at the moment.
Sally, how about you?
Well, if I'm going to say the first thing that came into my head, it was a teddy bear.
Oh. But
and then I started thinking,
that was because Gwilym planted that there earlier, though.
I was thinking, why am I thinking about teddy bear? Yeah, it may be subliminal from something that was said earlier. And it may be that I want a cuddle, or it may be that I want to give somebody else a cuddle. There's a hug aspect. The Dutch for teddy bear is knuffelbear, which means like hug bear, which is really cute.
Lovely.
It's a nice word for hug, knuffel. I'm probably not saying that right. Apologies to Dutch-speaking listeners.
Joe, how about you?
I think my mind went to the classic swan scenario of trying to appear really calm and measured on top, but feeling slightly frantic underneath. So that's where I am now.
And Cathy, how about you?
I was like a cat as well, Penny, but a fluffy cat. And for some reason, I was, those big stretches you have, and probably is wanting to get outside in the sunshine.
Lee, it turns out that was a great question.
Okay, was it? That's okay.
I'm glad you weren't prepared. I'm going to guess what you're going to say, and I'll write down a piece of paper and hold up. I'm going to hold up afterwards, but don't say it yet. I'm going to hold it up to this group so you know what I think you're going to say.
You're doing your Darren Brown bit. This is impressive.
Brown. It's not going to work. I'm just curious. Go on.
So the one thing that came to my mind, I don't know if it's how I'm feeling now or how I'm feeling on top of all of the other things that I'm dealing with today. And this was something that was said to me by past president of CIPA, Roger Burt. Not describing me at that time, but just using it as a sort of way of describing a particular situation. And he said he felt at one time like a bit of a post tortoise or post turtle. And then he showed me a picture of it. And it's a post in the middle of nowhere with a tortoise sat on top of it. And the kind of like the text accompanying it was something like, it shouldn't be there. You have no idea how it got there. You have no idea how it's getting down. And sometimes that's what it feels like to be kind of managing in situations. And I kind of feel a little bit like that at the moment. Like, how have I got here? Why am I here? How am I going to get away? So, little bit of a tortoise on a pole. For the audience,
Gwilym, you're wasted.
We always talk about tortoises on the podcast, so it was a given. It was a given.
But it genuinely wasn't a way of me squeezing that into the conversation. That was sort of like how I was feeling. So that's how cool is that? Penny, Joe, Cathy, Sally, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to talk to us about kind of what is probably one of the most important conversations we can have at the moment, and always. Penny, thanks for all you've done. We know that you are off to pastures greener, newer, whatever they might be. So good luck in wherever you go next. And obviously we look forward to continuing to work with Jonathan's voice on all things sort of mental health and supporting our members by working together. I've really enjoyed the podcast. I'm hoping that everyone who's listened has enjoyed it too, and feel inclined to leave us a little message telling us that they've done so on the podcasting platform of their choice, because that means that people will find us. I'm getting better at this kind of closing thing around that leave yourself and review thing, aren't I? Yeah.
Super slick.
Thanks all. That's a wrap.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.